Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. We've got a big PvP news update for Dragonflight. We have had the official announcement for the end of Shadowlands Season 4, which means that the Dragonflight pre-patch is imminent, and things are starting to come to a conclusion. So things are getting a little bit dangerous in terms of tuning at this point with how close and narrow the gap is starting to become. So we're going to be taking a look at these changes, which classes are going to be impacting the most, what's it going to be in terms of a result on the game overall, and where would be the best direction to go after this. And if you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with changes and news related to World of Warcraft and Dragonflight, then make sure to hit the subscribe button so you're always ahead of the competition and always making the best decision to enhance your own experience. So right off the top, we can see that a lot of these PvP specific changes are aimed at undoing PvP changes that they've made in previous expansions. I think that a lot of them have to do with Shadowlands, but even some of them prior to that, which means that spells that were tuned maybe even back in Legion to adjust a class in that given environment with that borrowed power and with that stat allocation may now no longer be applicable moving into Dragonflight, and is going to be giving a clean slate for the next expansion's tuning, which means that this is setting the foundation for what will come next. And like I said, with how close we are coming to the release of the expansion, things are getting kind of dangerous in terms of that, because we want more than just kind of the foundation. We want something built up on top of that. So the first change is that regrowth's initial heal is no longer reduced by 15% in PvP. I'm going to be honest, this seems entirely unnecessary to undo for pretty much all specializations of Druid, as regrowth with an honor talent, which provides a basically 100% crit chance, makes it really fast for Boomkin and Feral, makes regrowth a tremendous heal. And I'm sure that we've all seen the Nature Swiftness regrowths from Resto Druids that can basically do 5 times someone's health bar in one heal. So if they're undoing it here, then maybe they need to do it stronger again in the future. This first one seemed a little bit odd to me personally, given my knowledge of how powerful regrowth is in PvP currently on the Dragonflight beta and how powerful it has been throughout the past. So this first one, not a big fan. Again, maybe they're just trying to set the base, undo everything they've done, and then redo it later. But again, this feels a little bit unnecessary for this spell specifically. Kill command for hunters is now no longer going to deal 15% reduced damage in PvP. Now, in the past, when kill command was able to be used on players behind pillars, this change made a lot of sense. And I think that this may have came in a few expansions ago, maybe not even Shadowlands. But after that point, they made it so that kill command can't be used out of line of sight. You need to be in line of sight of your target to use kill command. And that really reduced the power of kill command. In general, hunters couldn't just sit behind the pillar and have their pet kill you. So this change does make more sense, especially considering that in Shadowlands, hunters have been pretty much just spamming Cobra Shot and Barbed Shot in PvP and never using kill command. So getting hunters to use kind of a third rotational button, I think, is going to add more depth to the class, make it more entertaining. And as long as the line of sight component to kill command remains, then unnerfing its damage shouldn't be too big of a deal. Marksmanship Hunter, aim shot is now no longer dealing 15% increased damage in PvP, and rapid fire is no longer dealing 10% increased damage in PvP. This is likely from the Shadowlands tuning, trying to bring marksmanship into a more competitive place. And there is a lot of one-shots going on in PvP at the moment. So my biggest concern for Dragonflight is that there are a lot of immediate one-shot kills and kind of like these immunity block effects, things like Warlocks with Dark Pact absorbing like 500,000 health points. We've got Templar's Verdicts from Ret Paladins KOing people, Elemental Blasts from Shamans KOing people, hundreds to zero. A lot of classes have these one-shot kills, and it's to me kind of the misinterpretation of what lethality is in the game. So throughout BFA, we basically had damage neutered, and we were hitting each other with pool noodles, and that experience was not fun. If I wanted to play, pillow fight or pool noodles, then I would go and do that. We want more intensity in the PvP match, but unfortunately, it seems to have doubled down on the effectiveness of cooldown, so that the window of cooldowns is really lethal. You're gonna get knocked out pretty fast if you're not responsive, but then the damage outside of the cooldowns is still pool noodle level, which is not where we want to be. And I think that for casual players, newcomers, people trying to learn the game, and even at the highest level where you need to download tons of weak auras to pop up massive alerts in your face to let you know that you're about to get one shot, is that it's not that great. It would be much better to disperse the damage out from the cooldowns and into the rest of the damage, so that you feel like you're having more of an impact throughout your engagements in PvP. and that level of intensity as opposed to lethality is a direction that I would like to go. So targeting, aim shot, and rapid fire, these abilities have now historically been kind of like one hit. Makes a lot of sense. So I do sort of like the direction of this, but it makes a lot more sense than something like this for Resto Druid, but we'll have to wait and see. Arcane Mage, unfortunately, I do not like this. Arcane Missiles no longer deals a 15% increased damage in PvP. Now, Arcane Mage is super powerful right now in PvP, probably one of the most overpowered classes at the moment, but taking damage out of their sustained damage and then just funneling it all into Arcane Surge is not the direction that I want to see for the classes. So seeing something like this, I'm really, again, it's just hoping that this is kind of they're setting the base floor and there's going to be more after this. And again, make sure you're subscribed, because if there is more, you're going to want to know what it is. But if there isn't, this is very troubling. Now also for Fire Mage, Fireball no longer deals 15% increased damage in PvP. Again, not really the direction that we want to see going. We want the casted spells that are outside of their cooldowns and the classes doing more damage. So seeing this go away is kind of disappointing. And then Pyroblast no longer dealing 15% reduced damage. So taking, again, from the sustained damage and then putting it into the burst is the opposite of what we want to see. And I get that they're undoing something that was to be an improvement in PvP in the past, but so then maybe they're replacing this with 30% in the opposite direction. That's my biggest hope. Now for Frost Mage, Ice Lance no longer deals 15% increased damage in PvP. Comet Storm no longer deals 10% reduced damage. Now the Comet Storm one makes sense. Comet Storm has not been very impactful in terms of its overall damage. I think this is probably a nerf from back in even Legion that was applied to Comet Storm. Because it was doing too much, and an older expansion makes a lot of sense. Ice Lance no longer dealing increased damage, can taking out of their instance. For Frostmage tuning and Shadowlance at the moment, their Ice Lance damage is very minimal, so taking this away is gonna feel bad, I think, initially. Hopefully there's gonna be more changes in the future. For Mistweaver Monk, we're seeing Enveloping Mist no longer healing for an additional 10% in PvP, and Vivify no longer heals for an additional 10% in PvP. Given all of the new talents and stuff, it's hard for me to know if Mistweaver really needs this. Again, Mistweaver's throughput has been through the ceiling so much so that I think 10% is really not even going to be noticeable. You won't even notice this on a Mistweaver. The problem is coming to the core of its class, which maybe has been alleviated with access to more defensive cooldowns and the new talent trees, and some of those critical weaknesses in gameplay might be alleviated, but a change like this is really not going to be noticed. Retribution Paladin, Divine Storm no longer deals 10% reduced damage in PvP. Again, I think this is back in Legion when they had the echoing Divine Storms from their artifact weapon. They could just AoE out a lot of damage. So repealing this, because right now in PvP all the damage coming from Final Verdict is fine. I think that makes sense. Priest, Power Word Shield no longer increased by 10%. This change does make a lot of sense with how powerful Power Word Shield is overall moving forward, especially on Discipline Priest. It is incredibly powerful, like 170,000 absorb shields. Really troubling effects on some healers at the moment in Dragonflight, like 1 or 2 spells just doing like 50% of all the value of your output. That's a bit of a concern to me at the moment, which is hopefully going to be looked at. Renew is no longer healing increased by 15% in PvP. This is going to bring down a lot of the hybrid healing now to something like Shadow, which has access to Renew as well as Discipline Priest. So for Holy, depending on how powerful the throughput is, we have to wait and see. Shadow and Disc might feel the nerf on this more than anything. For Shadow, Vampiric Touch no longer deals 10% increased damage in PvP. Don't like that. Again, taking damage out of the sustained spells. Not really a big fan of. Between the Eyes no longer deals 9% reduced damage in PvP for Outlaw. I think getting damage on Outlaw is fine. I think the biggest problem and the concern for Outlaw in Shadowlands at the moment has been its survivability. It's very forgiving on where you're going when you're using your cooldowns defensively, with Feint practically having no cooldown, Evasion's cooldown reduction, and so while having like the highest crowd control in the game and being borderline unkillable, we saw the representation of Outlaw through Shadowlands skyrocket, and it's because of its immunity to being taken down, basically. And a lot of players don't play it on the ladder because that's not really fun gameplay, just like, you can't kill me. But if you're playing for money, you're going to play the thing that can't die because it's going to be the most forgiving to mistakes, the highest likelihood of winning, which is why we saw higher representation of Outlaw in tournament and not higher representation on ladder. I think for the majority of players on ladder, we like playing things that hit really hard, right? Like running with giant axes and pounding people and doing massive damage. So some people like the immunity route and they play it, and some people want to abuse it to get to the highest point of the ladder. But generally speaking, we're not seeing clip videos of people that are immune to damage, right? We're seeing clip videos of people cracking skulls with massive crits. And I think that's why there's a disparity between Outlaws representation and tournament. So for me, I'd rather see its defense being brought down and its offense being brought up. So this I don't mind, as long as there is, again, the inverse effect of their defense coming down in the future. Eviscerate is no longer going to deal 10% reduced damage in PvP. Now note that Subtlety got a huge amount of changes. A lot of these classes got like nerfs and buffs, mostly nerfs, as you may have seen in my other videos, which will be linked at the end of this. So this is probably just putting Eviscerate back into its original location. Riptide's heal is no longer reduced by 15% in PvP. Again, I think this was a change either from BFA or Legion, when Riptide had either an Azerite trait or an extra effect on it that was making its healing ridiculous. You could just run around only using Riptide. So I think this is a fine change and will make sense for Restoration Shaman. Affliction Warlock, Agony is no longer dealing 15% increased damage. Corruption, Siphon Life, Shadow Bolt, Unstable Affliction, all Affliction lock damage buffs that got buffed for this season, those are being eradicated. Again, in the future, Dark Pact definitely needs to be looked at the moment, and Dragonflight is definitely one of the most outstanding abilities, but a little bit troubling again, because I do think that bringing up the sustained damage of classes was the right move. So undoing something like this and not having something else in the future to counteract it could be damaging to the game. We talked about this with Bounding Stride having reduced effectiveness and double time in my recent video, and all these other ones kind of popped in after the fact. And now we're going to see Overpower no longer deals 9% reduced damage, and Execute no longer deals 13% reduced damage in PvP. So Arms Warrior getting more damage at the moment on its sustained damage from Overpower, which I do like. Execute, I have to wait and see on the tuning in if we see like insane executes. I kind of want Arms Warrior going back to like, you get an execute range, executes and execute. I feel like that's always been kind of like this cool danger zone of trying to avoid against Arms Warrior. Now, of course, everybody's got in the back of their mind their current iteration of Arms Warrior that's like, wait, what? You want that with what they've had for so long? But if we're moving more into a fragility era of time for DPS where they're not just so tanky as they have been through Shadowlands, I think it would be fine to bring back the original like execute being an execute type of deal. So some of these changes troubling, some of them probably not going to have any impact at all. Overall, it just seems to be a blanket wipe. They're trying to get a clean slate, remove all previous PvP modifications that they've made, and that is hopefully then going to set the stage. But with how much limited time is left, does this mean that they're done raid testing? Does this mean they're splitting their time? What's going to be going on? This is the turning point of the expansion, is what happens in the next month after this. Can they deliver on it? And we'll be covering all of that here on the channel, so make sure you subscribe. Other than that, thank you very much for watching the video, and I will catch you in the next one.